The auction was nearly over. The grand hall, filled with traders and buyers from different alien species, smelled of dust and rusted metal. It was not a place of kindness. It was a place where things were sold, machines, scrap, and sometimes even people. Mira stood on the auction platform, her hands bound in front of her. She was thin, her clothes were torn, and her face was covered in dirt. She had been here for hours, waiting while other humans were sold one by one. Strong men, skilled workers, and healthy women had all been bought at high prices. But when it was Mira's turn, the crowd fell silent. Final one for today, the auctioneer announced, an alien with thick gray skin and glowing red eyes. Human girl, weak, useless, barely worth feeding. Mira lowered her eyes. She had heard those words before. To them, she was nothing. No strength, no special skills, just another human left behind when her colony was taken. She had been captured with the others, dragged through cold metal corridors, and locked in cages. Now she was here, being sold like broken equipment. Starting bid, 10 credits, the auctioneer said, but no one spoke. The crowd remained still. Buyers whispered among themselves, shaking their heads. She was too small, too fragile. She wouldn't last long in the mines, couldn't be trained as a fighter, and had no known talents. To them, she was worthless. 5 credits, the auctioneer tried again. Still, silence. Mira clenched her fists. If no one bought her, she knew what would happen. The unsold were taken away, thrown into the scrapyards where no one cared what happened to them. She had seen it before. 2 credits. Anyone. The auctioneer's voice grew impatient. A deep voice finally spoke. I'll take her. Mira lifted her head. A man stood at the edge of the crowd. He was human, something rare in this place. His short brown hair was streaked with gray, his face rough with scars. He wore a worn-out jacket, and his boots were covered in dust. Unlike the others, he didn't look at her with disgust. He looked curious. The auctioneer sighed. 2 credits. Sold. Take her and go. The man stepped forward, pulling a small metal card from his pocket to complete the purchase. Then, without a word, he took Mira's arm and led her away. His grip was firm, but not cruel. As they walked out of the auction hall, Mira finally dared to speak. Why? She asked. Her voice was dry, barely a whisper. The man glanced at her. Why what? Why buy me? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he led her down a narrow alley, away from the noise of the marketplace. Old ships and broken machines lay scattered around them. The place smelled of oil and rust. He finally stopped in front of a large, half-damaged starship. My name's Rin, he said. I run a scrapyard. You'll work there. Fix things, clean, learn something useful. It's better than being left behind, right? Mira stared at him. It was true. Anything was better than the alternative. But she still didn't understand. I'm not strong, she admitted. I'm not special. Rin sighed, crossing his arms. Maybe. Maybe not. But I've been around long enough to know something. He looked her straight in the eyes. The ones everyone calls worthless. Sometimes, they're the ones who surprise you the most. Mira didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. No one had ever thought she could be more than nothing. For the first time in a long time, she felt a tiny spark inside her. A spark of hope. She followed Rin onto the ship, stepping toward a future she had never expected. Mira sat in the corner of the old starship as it rumbled through the sky. The seat was rough. The air smelled like oil and metal, and the lights flickered now and then. But she didn't complain. This was better than the cold auction hall. Better than being left behind. Rin sat in the pilot's seat, his hand steady on the controls. He wasn't like the other buyers Mira had seen before. He didn't treat her like an object, but that didn't mean she trusted him. Where are we going? She finally asked. Rin glanced at her but kept his eyes on the controls. Home, he said simply. Mira didn't know what that meant. Humans didn't have homes anymore. Not since the aliens took their colonies and scattered them across the galaxy. She had no home, no family, no future. After a few hours, the ship finally landed. The doors hissed open, revealing a dusty, broken world. The air was thick with the smell of rust and burnt metal. Towers of scrap, old machines, and broken starships covered the landscape. This was not a city. This was a graveyard for forgotten things. "Welcome to the yard," Rin said, stepping outside. Mira followed him, looking around. There were a few workers, humans and other aliens, digging through the piles of junk, searching for parts. Some of them stopped to look at her, whispering among themselves. A new one. A man with a missing arm muttered. "She won't last a week," a blue-skinned alien snorted. Mira lowered her gaze. She was used to those words. Rin ignored them. "Come on," he said, leading her toward a small building at the edge of the yard. Inside, it was just as messy as the outside. Tools, wires, and metal scraps covered the tables. "You can stay here," he said, pointing to a small cot in the corner. Mira stood silently. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. Rin sat on a chair, stretching his legs. "You learn, you work, you eat. That's the deal." Mira frowned. "Learn what?" Rin picked up a small broken drone from the table. "Machines. How to fix them, how to make them useful again." He tossed the drone toward her. "Start with this." Mira caught it awkwardly. She turned it over in her hands. It was old, covered in dust, and missing some parts. She had never fixed anything before. "I don't know how," she admitted. Rin leaned back. "Then figure it out." Mira looked at the drone again. She had spent most of her life being told she was useless. She had never been given a chance to prove otherwise. Maybe this was her chance. Maybe Rin wasn't lying when he said she could learn something useful. She sat on the floor, using her fingers to pull open the drone's casing. The wires inside were tangled and broken. She didn't know what they did, but she studied them carefully. Hours passed. Rin gave her food, a small piece of bread and some water. But he didn't help her. He just watched. By the time the sky outside darkened, Mira's fingers were sore. But she had done something she never thought she could. The drone's eyes flickered, then glowed softly. It was working. Rin chuckled. "Not bad," he said. "You learn fast." Mira stared at the little drone as it hovered slightly before falling again. It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't broken anymore. For the first time in her life, she had fixed something. The spark inside her grew. But outside the scrapyard, danger was already coming. The aliens who had sold her had heard the rumors. A human girl with no value, who suddenly had value. And they didn't like mistakes. Mira woke up to the sound of metal clanking outside. The scrapyard was already alive with activity. The workers moved through the piles of junk, searching for parts that could be fixed or sold. The air smelled like rust and burning wires, but Mira didn't mind. This place was strange, rough, and noisy, but it was better than the auction hall. She sat up on the small cot Rin had given her. Her fingers were still sore from fixing the drone last night. She looked at it, lying on the table beside her. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. That thought made something inside her feel different. She wasn't useless. She quickly got up and stepped outside. Rin was already busy, fixing a large engine with a few other workers. He glanced at her and smirked. "Still here," he said. Mira nodded. "What do I do today?" Rin wiped his hands on his worn-out jacket and tossed a small metal device at her. She barely caught it. "This is a power core from an old security bot. It's dead. Think you can fix it?" Mira turned it over in her hands. It was small, heavy, and covered in dust. She had no idea how a power core worked, but she wasn't going to give up. "I can try," she said. Rin chuckled. "Good answer." Mira found a quiet spot near a pile of scrap and sat down. She pried the device open, her fingers moving carefully. The wires inside were burned, the circuits cracked. She didn't understand everything, but she remembered how the drone's wiring looked. Hours passed as she worked. She borrowed tools from the workshop, studying the other machines around her. The other workers didn't help. Some laughed when they saw her struggling. "She thinks she's an engineer now," one of them muttered. "She won't last a week," another said. Mira ignored them. She focused on the power core, her hand steady, her mind sharp. She didn't know how, but she could see how the machine was supposed to work. She replaced the broken circuits, reconnected the wires, and adjusted the energy flow. Finally, she pressed a small button on the side. The core flickered. Then, it glowed a soft blue. It was working. Mira felt a strange excitement. She had done it. She picked up the core and ran to Rin, holding it out to him. "I fixed it." Rin raised an eyebrow. "That fast?" He took the core, inspecting it. His eyes widened slightly. "Well, I'll be damned." One of the workers, a large man named Dorn, frowned. "She just got lucky." Rin shook his head. "No, this isn't luck." He turned to Mira. "Where did you learn to do this?" Mira hesitated. "Nowhere. I just saw how it should work." Rin studied her for a moment. Then he smiled. "You're more than you think, kid." For the first time, someone believed in her. But not everyone was happy. That night, while Mira was working late, she overheard two workers whispering near the entrance. "She's trouble," one of them said. "The aliens won't like this," the other replied. "They sold her as worthless. If they find out she's not, they'll come back." Mira's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't thought about that. The ones who sold her, they didn't like mistakes. If they found out she had value, they wouldn't just ignore it. They would want to erase their error. She felt her hands shake, but then she looked at the glowing power core in front of her. She had two choices: stay weak and hide, or prove that she was more than they ever thought. Mira clenched her fists. She was done being nothing. Mira couldn't sleep. The words she had overheard kept echoing in her mind. "The aliens won't like this." She lay on her cot in the small workshop, staring at the ceiling. The metal roof creaked slightly in the night wind. Outside, the scrapyard was quiet, but Mira knew that danger was coming. The ones who had sold her had made a mistake, and powerful people didn't like mistakes. She sat up, her heart pounding. Should she run? Hide? Tell Rin? No. Rin had already done enough for her. He had taken her in when no one else wanted her. He had given her a chance. She couldn't bring trouble to him. Mira took a deep breath and stood up. If they were coming, she needed to be ready. She grabbed the broken drone she had repaired and placed it on the table. It wasn't much, but if she could improve it, maybe she could use it to help her escape. She picked up a small energy core and started working. Minutes turned into hours. She connected wires, adjusted circuits, and upgraded the drone's sensors. Her hands moved quickly, her mind focused. She didn't know where this knowledge came from, but it felt natural, like she had been meant to do this all along. By the time the sun began to rise, the drone was hovering smoothly in front of her, its eyes glowing blue. At least now, she wasn't completely helpless. Rin was already outside when Mira stepped out. He was standing near the scrapyard's entrance, watching the horizon. His expression was serious. Something was wrong. Mira walked up beside him. "What's happening?" Rin didn't look at her. "Got some visitors coming," he said. Mira's chest tightened. "Who?" Before Rin could answer, a loud humming sound filled the air. Mira turned and saw a sleek black ship descending from the sky. It was nothing like the old junkers in the yard. This one was clean, dangerous looking. The ship landed, kicking up dust. A ramp extended, and 3 figures stepped out. Mira recognized them instantly. They were the ones who had sold her. The alien in front, a tall figure with pale green skin and sharp black eyes, scanned the yard before speaking. "We are here for the girl." Ren crossed his arms. She's mine now. Bought her fair and square. The alien's eyes narrowed. We made an error in judgment. She is not worthless. That means she does not belong to you. Mira took a step back. She could feel her pulse in her ears. They weren't here to take her back. They were here to erase their mistake. Ren stood firm. Not happening. The alien sighed. Unfortunate. He lifted his hand and snapped his fingers. A second later, 2 armored enforcers stepped out of the ship, their weapons humming with energy. Mira's breath caught. They were going to kill her. Ren didn't hesitate. In one quick motion, he grabbed Mira's arm and pulled her behind him. Run, he ordered. But now. Mira turned and sprinted. Behind her, she heard the crackle of weapons firing. Sparks flew as shots hit the metal scraps around her. She didn't stop. She darted between piles of junk, her heart pounding. She needed to get to the workshop. She needed a plan. Her drone. She grabbed the small controller from her pocket and pressed a button. The drone activated instantly, lifting into the air. Mira guided it toward the enforcers. It wasn't built for combat, but it could still cause trouble. The drone zipped through the air and crashed into one of the enforcers, making him stumble. It wasn't much, but it gave Ren enough time to grab a metal pipe and swing it at the other one. Mira kept running. She reached the workshop and slammed the door behind her. Think. She grabbed the tools and parts she had collected over the past few days. If she couldn't fight, she needed to be smarter. She needed to outthink them. She heard footsteps outside. They were coming for her. Mira clenched her fists. She wasn't worthless. She would prove it. Mira pressed her back against the workshop door, her breathing fast and uneven. Outside, heavy footsteps crunched against the scrapyard dirt. The enforcers were coming. She scanned the small space around her. Tools, metal scraps, old power cells, nothing she could use as a weapon. She wasn't strong enough to fight, but she didn't need strength. She needed to be smarter. Her eyes locked onto the power core she had fixed yesterday. It wasn't much, but it still held energy. If she could overload it. Mira rushed to the workbench, her fingers moving quickly. She twisted open the core's casing and adjusted the internal wiring. It hummed softly in her hands. She had only seconds before they broke in. Bang! The door shook as something heavy slammed against it. Mira took a deep breath and placed the unstable power core near the entrance. Then she grabbed her drone controller and backed away. Bang! The second hit cracked the doorframe. Bang! The door burst open. 2 enforcers stormed in, their weapons raised. The moment they stepped inside, Mira pressed a button on her controller. The drone, still hovering outside, zipped in and crashed into the power core. Boom! A bright blue flash filled the room. Sparks exploded, and a wave of energy knocked the enforcers off their feet. Their armor protected them from the worst of it, but it gave Mira the opening she needed. She bolted through the side door and ran. Outside, Ren was still fighting. He had managed to knock one enforcer down, but the lead alien, the one who had sold Mira, stood calmly watching. His black eyes followed Mira as she ran toward him. Mira skidded to a stop. He wasn't moving. He wasn't afraid. Why? Then she saw it. He pressed a button on his wrist. Behind her, the enforcers rose to their feet. The energy blast had only delayed them. Mira's heart pounded. She was trapped. The alien smirked. "You are not special," he said coldly. "You are a mistake, and mistakes must be erased." Mira clenched her fists. No. No more being weak. No more being helpless. She grabbed the drone controller and pressed another button. The drone, still floating in the air, zipped forward and slammed into the alien's wrist. Sparks flew as the device shattered. The alien cursed, stepping back in surprise. Ren took the chance. He lunged, grabbed a loose cable from the ground, and wrapped it around the alien's throat. With a sharp pull, he yanked him to the ground. "Run, Mira," Rin shouted. Mira didn't hesitate. She dashed toward an old, half-broken vehicle at the edge of the scrapyard. It was a rusted transport skiff, barely functional. But maybe, just maybe, she could fix it. She scrambled into the driver's seat, her hands flying over the controls. The engine sputtered, coughing smoke. The enforcers charged toward her. Come on, come on. She rewired the power circuit, bypassed the broken ignition, and sent an energy surge into the engine. The skiff roared to life. Mira grabbed the controls and slammed her foot on the accelerator. The skiff shot forward, kicking up dust. She barely had time to grab Rin's arm as she passed him. He jumped on, and they sped away from the scrapyard. Behind them, the enforcers fired their weapons, but the skiff was already too far. Mira didn't look back. For the first time in her life, she wasn't running from something. She was running towards something new. The old transport skiff rattled as it sped across the barren wasteland. Rusted metal plates barely held together as the engine roared, struggling to keep them moving. Mira gripped the controls tightly, her heart still pounding from the escape. Rin sat beside her, breathing hard. He glanced back, scanning the horizon. "They'll follow us," he said. Mira knew he was right. The enforcers wouldn't stop until they erased her. She was supposed to be worthless, an object discarded like junk. But now, she had proven them wrong, and that made her a threat. She focused on the controls, adjusting the energy flow to stabilize the skiff. The terrain ahead was rough, filled with rocky dunes and scattered wreckage from old battles. If they could get far enough, they might find a place to hide. "We need a plan," Rin said. Mira tightened her grip. "I know." Rin studied her for a moment. "You're different from when I first found you," he said. "You were scared. Now, you're thinking ahead." Mira didn't respond immediately. He was right. The fear was still there, deep inside, but something else had taken over, determination. She wasn't running just to survive. She was running to prove that she mattered. The skiff jolted suddenly as something exploded behind them. Mira looked back. A sleek black pursuit drone was closing in, its weapons glowing. "They found us," Rin shouted. Mira's mind raced. The skiff had no weapons. They couldn't outrun the drone for long. She needed a different approach. She turned sharply, heading toward a large cluster of wrecked ships ahead. The pursuit drone adjusted course, staying locked onto them. Mira's fingers flew over the controls. "I have an idea," she said. "Hope it's a good one," Rin muttered. The wreckage was getting closer. Old ship husks stood like broken towers, their metal skeletons rusted and forgotten. Mira aimed for the narrowest gap between two ships. "Hold on," she warned. The skiff shot through the tight space, scraping against jagged metal. Sparks flew. The drone followed, adjusting its speed. Mira gritted her teeth. "Come on." As soon as they cleared the gap, she slammed the controls to the side, swerving into another passage. The drone hesitated for a fraction of a second before turning, just enough time for what she needed. Mira pressed a button on her controller. The small drone she had repaired earlier shot out from its compartment and flew toward the wreckage. The pursuit drone was faster, more powerful, but Mira's drone was unpredictable. It zipped through the broken metal beams, leading the enemy into a tighter path. Then, Mira triggered the failsafe. Her drone exploded in a bright burst of energy. The shockwave rippled through the wreckage. Metal beams snapped, collapsing into the passage just as the pursuit drone reached it. The enemy drone didn't have time to react. It slammed into the falling debris and was crushed instantly. Mira exhaled, her hands trembling on the controls. It worked. Rin let out a low whistle. "You really are something else, kid." Mira managed a small smile, but it faded quickly. This wasn't over. The enforcers wouldn't give up after losing one drone. They needed to find a real place to hide, and fast. Rin seemed to sense her worry. He pointed toward the horizon. "There's an old outpost not far from here. It was abandoned years ago, but it might still have supplies. Maybe even a working ship. Mira nodded. Then that's where we go. She pushed the skiff forward, leaving the wreckage behind. The battle wasn't over, but she had proven one thing today. She wasn't worthless. She was dangerous to those who had underestimated her, and she was just getting started. The desert stretched endlessly before them, the heat waves shimmering in the distance. Mira kept her hand steady on the skiff's controls, pushing the old machine as fast as it could go. Rin sat beside her, scanning the horizon. There, he pointed. Mira narrowed her eyes. At first, she saw nothing but sand and broken rocks. Then, a dark shape appeared, an old outpost, half buried in the dunes. The structure looked damaged, with parts of its walls collapsed. They had no other choice. Mira guided the skiff toward it. As they got closer, she noticed faded markings on the walls. The symbols looked alien, but the doors and structure were built for humans. A human outpost, she asked. Used to be, Rin replied. A long time ago. But the war changed everything. Places like this were abandoned when the bigger colonies fell. Mira slowed the skiff and stopped near the entrance. The wind howled through the broken walls, carrying the scent of rust and decay. She and Rin jumped off. He pulled out a small energy pistol, while Mira grabbed a wrench from the skiff, her only weapon. They stepped inside. The air was stale, heavy with dust. Broken crates and rusted equipment lay scattered across the floor. Mira's eyes adjusted to the dim light. Do you think anything still works here? Rin moved toward a control panel on the wall. He wiped away the dust and pressed a few buttons. The screen flickered weakly before dying again. Not much, he muttered. But if we're lucky, the power core might still be here. Mira felt a flicker of hope. If they found a power core, they could recharge the skiff, or even get a working ship. She moved deeper into the outpost, stepping over debris. Something about this place felt strange. It was abandoned, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, had been here recently. Then she saw it. Footprints. Mira froze. Rin, she whispered. He turned. She pointed at the ground. The dust had been disturbed. The footprints weren't old. They weren't alone. Rin tightened his grip on the pistol. Stay close, he whispered. Mira nodded. They followed the tracks through a dark hallway. The lights overhead flickered weakly, casting long shadows on the walls. A door at the end of the hall was slightly open. Mira held her breath as she peeked inside. Her heart stopped. Inside the room, a figure sat hunched over a table. It was a man, human, but worn and thin, his clothes tattered. His hands were covered in grease as he worked on a small mechanical device. He hadn't noticed them. Mira stepped forward cautiously. Hello. The man jumped, knocking over the device. He spun around, his eyes wild. He looked between Mira and Rin, his breathing heavy. You're not enforcers, he muttered. Mira shook her head. No. Who are you? The man hesitated, then sighed. Name's Orin, he said. I've been hiding here for years. Hiding from who? Rin asked. Orin's face darkened. The same ones after you. I'd guess. The ones who think people are nothing but tools to use and throw away. Mira's hands clenched into fists. You mean the enforcers? Orin nodded. They took everything from me. I used to be an engineer for the colonies. When the war ended, they didn't need me anymore. They sold me off. I escaped and found this place. Mira exchanged a look with Rin. This man had suffered the same way she had. Rin lowered his weapon. We need to get out of here. Do you know if there's a working ship? Orin hesitated, then nodded toward the back of the room. There's an old transport ship in the hangar. It's not perfect, but with a little work. Mira's heart leaped. We can fix it. Orin gave her a long look, then smiled faintly. You're different, he said. Most people would have given up. Mira straightened. I don't give up. Orin nodded. Then let's get to work. If the enforcers find us here, we won't stand a chance. Mira took a deep breath. They had a chance now. A real chance to escape. And this time, she wouldn't let anyone take it from her. Mira wiped the sweat from her forehead as she tightened the last bolt. The old transport ship in the hangar was falling apart, but it was still salvageable. She had spent hours repairing its core systems, hoping it would be enough to get them out of this wasteland. Orin, the old engineer, worked beside her, his hand steady despite his tired face. Rin stood near the entrance, keeping watch. The enforcers wouldn't stop hunting them. They had to move fast. Mira glanced at Orin. Will it fly? Orin exhaled and checked the power readings. The thrusters are weak, and the navigation system is barely working. But it should fly if we don't push it too hard. It wasn't the best answer, but it was enough. Ren turned sharply. We don't have time to test it. They're coming. Mira froze. Are you sure? Ren nodded. I saw dust rising in the distance, vehicles moving fast. They must have tracked us here. A cold feeling settled in Mira's chest. They were out of time. Orin rushed to the pilot's seat and powered up the ship. The engine sputtered, struggling to wake up after years of being unused. Mira ran to the control panel, adjusting the power flow. The engines roared to life. The ship shook, dust rising from the floor. They're here, Rin shouted. Mira turned toward the hangar entrance. A black enforcer vehicle skidded to a stop outside. Armed figures jumped out, their weapons glowing. Shots fired. Sparks exploded as energy blasts hit the walls. Orin pulled the controls. Hang on. The ship lifted slightly but wobbled, unsteady. The damaged thrusters struggled to keep balance. Mira ran to the weapons console. Most of the ship's defenses were broken, but one cannon still worked. She aimed quickly and fired. The blast hit near the enforcers, sending them diving for cover. It wouldn't stop them, but it bought time. The ship trembled. We need more power, Orin yelled. Mira's mind raced. The main power core wasn't giving enough energy. If she redirected the backup reserves, it might work, but it would burn out the system in minutes. She made a decision. Running to the engine room, she pulled open a control panel and rerouted the power. The lights flickered. The ship groaned. Then, the engines roared louder, and the ship lifted off the ground. We're flying, Orin shouted. Mira ran back to the cockpit. The enforcers fired at them, their shots barely missing. One blast hit the side of the ship, shaking it violently. We need to get out of range, Rin said. Orin pushed the ship forward. The thrusters struggled, but the craft accelerated. The ground fell away beneath them. The enforcers kept shooting, but soon they were nothing more than specks in the desert below. Mira let out a breath. They had escaped. For now. Inside the ship, the relief was short-lived. The ship won't last long, Orin warned. The power reserves are burning out. We need a safe place to land and fix it properly. Mira thought for a moment. Is there anywhere nearby? Orin hesitated. There's an old human colony not far from here. It was abandoned after the war, but there might still be supplies. Rin frowned. Or it could be a trap. Mira didn't like the idea either, but they had no choice. If the ship failed mid-flight, they'd crash. Set a course, she said. We'll take the risk. Orin nodded and adjusted the navigation. The ship trembled but obeyed. As they flew toward the unknown, Mira clenched her fists. She had come too far to stop now. She wasn't worthless. She was a survivor. And she would prove it to the universe. The old transport ship shook as it flew through the sky, its engines barely holding together. Sparks flickered from the damaged panels, and the warning lights blinked red across the cockpit. Mira gritted her teeth, her hands gripping the edge of her seat. We're losing altitude, Orin warned, his voice strained. Mira looked at the navigation screen. They were close to the abandoned human colony, But the ship wouldn't hold up much longer. If they didn't land soon, they would crash. "I see it," Rin shouted, pointing through the cracked viewport. Below them, a collection of old buildings stretched across the rocky landscape. The colony was surrounded by broken walls and rusted machinery, but some structures still looked intact. It was their only hope. "Taking us down," Orin said. The ship wobbled as he guided it toward an open clearing. The thrusters struggled to slow their descent, but Mira knew they weren't going to land smoothly. "Brace yourselves," Orin yelled. The ship hit the ground hard. Metal screeched as they skidded across the dirt, kicking up dust and debris. The impact threw Mira forward, but she held on tight. Then, silence. Mira slowly opened her eyes. The ship had stopped moving. Smoke rose from the damaged thrusters, and the interior was filled with the scent of burnt wires. "Everyone okay?" Rin asked, coughing. Orin groaned. "I think I lost a few years of my life, but I'm alive." Mira exhaled. They had made it. But they weren't safe yet. Stepping out of the ship, Mira scanned the colony. The air was dry, and the wind howled through the empty streets. Old buildings stood like silent ghosts, their walls cracked and faded. "It's been abandoned for years," Rin muttered. Orin adjusted his goggles. "Maybe, but let's not assume we're alone." Mira nodded. She had learned that lesson before. Just because something looked abandoned didn't mean it was. They moved cautiously through the colony, weapons ready. Broken machinery lay scattered across the ground, and faded banners of the old human government flapped weakly in the wind. Then Mira saw something. Footprints. Fresh ones. She signaled the others and pointed. Rin's expression darkened. "Someone's here." Orin whispered, "If they're survivors, they might help us. If they're enemies." He didn't finish his sentence, but Mira knew what he meant. They followed the tracks, moving deeper into the colony. The footprints led to a large building, its doors slightly open. Mira took a deep breath and stepped inside. The room was filled with old technology, consoles, wires, and equipment stacked against the walls. At the center, a group of people sat around a flickering holographic map. They turned as Mira, Rin, and Orin entered. A woman with sharp eyes and short, dark hair stood up. She held a weapon but didn't raise it. "Who are you?" Mira straightened. "We're just trying to survive." The woman studied them for a moment. Then she nodded. "So are we." Relief washed over Mira. These weren't enforcers. They were survivors, like her. Another man, older and with a mechanical arm, stepped forward. "You came in that ship." Or inside. "Came in, crashed in. Same thing." The man smirked. "We have tools. We can help fix it." Mira's heart lifted. This was their chance. But the woman said, crossing her arms, "If we help you, we need something in return." Rin raised an eyebrow. "What kind of help?" The woman looked at the holographic map. "The enforcers have been hunting us for years. We need to fight back. If you stay, we fight together." Mira glanced at Rin and Orin. She had spent her whole life running, trying to prove she was worth something. Now, she had a choice. She could keep running, or she could stand and fight for something bigger than herself. Mira lifted her chin. "We're in." The woman smiled. "Welcome to the resistance." As the sun set over the ruined colony, Mira knew one thing for sure. She had been sold for nothing, deemed worthless. But here, in this forgotten place, she had found her true worth. And she was ready to fight for it.